Welcome back, guys. Today we have got a Q&A that I wanted to do for you guys. So we've got 10 of my favorite questions. Actually, it's 10 questions that Meg picked for us from my Instagram Q&A. Those of you who don't follow me on Instagram, type my name in, it will come up, click follow. And those of you who are not subscribed to the YouTube channel just yet, please do me a favor and click the subscribe button. Now, top 10 questions from the Q&A. And the next Q&A that we'll want to do will be from YouTube. So if you want me to answer your question for my next Q&A, please pop your question below in the comments and I will cover it on the next Q&A. So the best 10 questions will get covered. Question number one. Want to dive in here straight away. Want to get stuck into nitty gritty, right? So question number one, could you cover recovery, adaptation, fatigue ratio as to why it is better to train frequently? Now, first and foremost, I am going to give credit to Chris Beardsley as he has been putting out some amazing content regarding this just recently. It's nothing new. It's something that Jordan Peters, my best friend, my mentor, has been preaching for many, many years. Higher training frequency and splitting up your training volume will lend itself to better quality training volume. For example, let's say you've got 10 sets of chest and you only train chest on a Monday and you do 10 sets at once. The quality of that training volume, the quality of the whole 10 sets will be much lower than splitting it up onto Monday and Thursday and doing the same amount of volume. So 10 sets total, but split across Monday and Thursday, which means that you only have 5 working sets to do on Monday and Thursday. What we know in regards to volume is that it's not just the number of sets. It's your load, it's your intensity, it's your tempo, it's your execution. It all amounts to training volume and your repetitions. If you do too much in one session, the quality of that volume slowly diminishes, which means that breaking the training volume down across your week, training more frequently, not only gives you more chances and opportunities for that growth and adaptation to happen. Every single time you train a body part, you then see adaptation and recovery happen days after that. Not only you get better quality training volume, but you also get more chances for that adaptation to occur. And the fatigue that you get off the back of that with less volume, but more frequency is arguably better. So you do not get quite as high fatigue, but you get better stimulus. So similar to fatigue ratio, stimulus to fatigue ratio is much, much better. Question number two, is it possible for legs to hold on to fat due to cardio, fatigue, stress, even if the deficit is assured? Fat, no. You cannot hold on to body fat in a certain body part. However, one thing you have to understand is every person stores body fat slightly differently, especially guys who are not quite seasoned. The body fat distribution won't be quite even and they will have certain body parts that simply store more body fat, and generally it is the body parts that are weaker. The more advanced you get, more times you prep, more time you get lean, and I mean stage lean, fat-free. Your body fat distribution then becomes a little bit more even, so you don't seem to run into same issues and same problems. Now, water will be an issue if you are overdoing your expenditure and you are not managing your fatigue correctly. Can you hold fat in a certain area, especially legs? No. Can you hold water in them? Yes, if you are doing way too much hard cardio, way too many steps. Generally, it will always be down to doing way too much cardio. So generally, I am not a fan of cardio in prep. I am more of a fan of manipulating the calorie deficit through the diet and steps, which is a low impact expenditure, which will then not make you not make you as fatigued and not make you retain as much water if you are prone to retaining water. So key is managing your fatigue and make sure you periodize your contest prep as well and allocate times for deloads, diet breaks, and days of rest when they're needed, especially if you are seeing that water retention get higher and higher, which will then skew your ability to assess your physique as to how much water you are holding versus body fat. Question number three, great question. Training question. How do you protect the joints when doing heavyweight training? It's very, very simple. When you are training with proper execution, proper range of motion and proper control, especially in end ranges and proper eccentric control, which not only makes the movement harder, but it makes the movement more effective, allowing you to break down more muscle tissue, but it also makes the movement safer because the more control you have over your eccentric, so coming down into the stretch, especially in big compound lifts like the squat or even pressing, the safer you will be as you actually come down into that stretch. And then secondly, if you take a pause in that stretch, you own that rep, and then you drive back up, you are ensuring that you are not moving the load through momentum and joint elasticity. So your goal is keeping that load and tension on the actual muscle. And as a reference point, if you find yourself that your joints are hurting, it's simply down to poor execution and lack of control of the movements. Ever since I focused on my execution much more, I have not experienced much, if any, joint pain. And touch wood, I have been pretty much injury-free. Train your muscles, not your joints. Your goal is trying to create as much tension on the actual muscle that you're trying to train, not just lift the load from A to B. If your joints hurt, you are simply lifting above and beyond to what your body can actually tolerate. You're not lifting with enough control, range of motion, and proper execution. So address that, and I can promise you, not only will you gain more, but you will also see better connective tissue health and longevity in the sport, which is key. Question number 4, another training question. I love those. Are compound exercises free weight, bread and butter for those who have no to little muscle? Amazing question, because your body doesn't know whether you are doing a barbell back squat or a hack squat. So in my opinion, yes, you should learn bread and butter movements, yes, but they are not necessarily movements that will add the muscle, because they are generally the movements that require a lot more stability and external bracing. So I would argue, yes, a beginner needs to learn all of these movements, but if you are looking for a way to just add some muscle on one of your clients that isn't really great with actually performing any exercises, I would argue starting them with machines is going to be a better option to actually build a foundation and actually build some muscle, which will then enable them to have much better stability and even mind to muscle connection going into free weight movements. I have PT'd for 4 years, from the age of 16 to the age of 20. And one thing I have realized working the gym floor, and I think that's lacking in online coaching industry, and that's something I pride myself in, is that when you first start training clients, you see certain things. And one thing I noticed training guys who were very inexperienced is that they didn't get much from free weight movements because they didn't have the skill to be able to actually execute them, to get anything out of them. So I would often start them on machines. Once they develop enough skill where they actually was able to train well on a Smith machine and connect with the very little muscle that they have, then we would move on to compound lifts. And then they would actually have a much easier time to progress them and learn them. So your body doesn't recognize what exercise you do. Your body only recognizes tension, especially when it comes to trying to build muscle tissue. Unless you're powerlifting, it's a completely different ball game. You have to learn all the movements, but you have to also understand that some movements are better than others when it comes to building muscle tissue. Generally, movements that provide you external bracing, like machines, will be better and far superior when it comes to building muscle, and safer, especially for guys who are much, much stronger. One thing that I do think is missed and overlooked is learning how to brace properly, which again, something is extremely important. Having that abdominal pressure and being able to brace across all of the exercises, that's something that people should be able to learn straight away. And then learning how to execute all lifts correctly. And I would often start people off machines, to be honest, especially guys who are very underdeveloped. So bit of a curveball there for you guys. Next question. Biggest focus on as a natty bodybuilder, especially a beginner? Nothing changes here, guys. The focus remains the same, whether you're natty or assisted. And I think what natural athletes and a lot of my natural clients are much more comfortable in doing is being a lot more patient within the process. And that means a longer contest prep and a longer off season and more control throughout both phases. The reason why a lot of guys who are assisted are cutting themselves short from being able to reach the true potential is lack of patience. Because assistants can speed things up, they often think that their approach needs to change and they can afford to either start eating way more food than they need to, or start not eating as much food as they need to in prep. So in short, people often rush their off seasons, gaining way too much body fat and getting too inflamed. And I would argue when you are using drugs, you should stay leaner than a natural athlete, because the things that you're taking, they are already causing inflammation and water retention. If you combine that with a surplus above and beyond your needs, it's a recipe for no progress. The same thing that's required for all bodybuilders, in my opinion, for natural guys and assisted guys, is patience. Especially for natural guys, it's going to take a lot longer for you to grow the muscle tissue and a lot longer for you to get leaner whilst retaining that muscle tissue. So patience, consistency, and discipline is key within your journey. So you have to lock in, you have to focus on the process. and you have to be extremely patient. That's something that I've learned. And if you can apply that patience and consistency and being disciplined with that patience, I can promise you the reward is so, so great off the back of it. This is where practicing delayed gratification in bodybuilding is extremely undervalued. And this is where, if you're able to practice it, you will reap the rewards and you will make more progress than ever. Next question, guys. How important is mind to muscle connection for execution? Not very important, because if you focus on mind to muscle connection and your setup of the exercise and execution is poor, you are not going to get the mind to muscle connection that you're looking for. The setup of your exercise comes first. So your height adjustment, your seat adjustment, your chest pad adjustment, the way you position yourself within that exercise comes first. How you set up that exercise is extremely important, because how you set up that exercise will dictate your execution. Then once you work on your execution and your execution is correct alongside of your tempo, control, range of motion, the mind to muscle connection will be there, because all these things will force the mind to muscle connection to be there. So mind to muscle connection is not something I focus on. I focus on setup of the exercise, exercise execution, tempo, control, and range of motion. Once these factors are all nailed down, that is when you will notice that your mind to muscle connection is absolutely amazing. So don't focus on mind to muscle connection. Address your setup and exercise execution, and mind to muscle connection is a byproduct of both of them getting nailed down. What is your number one tip you would give to someone before stepping on stage? If you have truly done this prep for the right reasons, and you have done everything you have in your power, and you have done everything that you could in your power to be the best version of yourself for that given moment in time, you will be so ready to step on stage. You will love the process and you will love that day. The only times I feel like people have a bad experience is that, one, they have not embarked on the journey for the right reasons. Two, they haven't done this long enough. They are doing it more so for social media glory. And three, they haven't done everything that was required in order to get in shape. I can hand on heart say, every single time I stepped on stage, I knew I did everything that I could to be the best version of myself that I could at that given time. And that is a wonderful feeling, because off-season, contest prep, bodybuilding itself, it's a journey, right? Stepping on stage is like that cherry on top when you start baking a cake, right? You start from your base, you work your way up, and then you've got that cherry on top that just finishes it off nicely. That is what competing is all about. And that cherry on top is pretty useless if there's no foundation beneath it. So you need to focus on building that foundation from ground up. Be prepared to push yourself harder than you ever have done, so that when you do step on that stage, regardless of the result, you are fulfilled and you are proud of the package that you've brought. That is my one tip. How to push calories when moving to the off season after leaving the competition process? Well, it all depends. Firstly, it depends on your size, how much calories you have finished on, whether you have used any fat burners, whether you have used above and beyond what you needed with the supplementation. So I can give you a little bit of a rough ballpark figure, right? It could be between 400 up to 1,000 calories addition as you transition out of a contest prep into your post-show phase. The amount of calories will be dictated by your size, your training age, your ability to actually adhere to the plan. Some people need more calories to simply be able to adhere to the plan with no binging post-show. So as a rough guide, it could be anywhere between 400 to up to 1,000 calories, depending on how big you are, how little or how much food you actually finished on, in order to be able to recover properly post-prep. Let's say I'm a natural athlete, that some of them may finish the prep on 1,800 calories. The first step would be a 500 calorie addition to their plan, coming from carbohydrates and potentially some fats. It depends how low we had to go, alongside of a slight reduction in their expenditure. So if they was doing cardio, first thing would be the cardio would get removed. If the steps was, for example, sitting at 15,000, I would reduce that to 12,000. And then I would add 500 calories to the baseline diet. So we would go from 1,800 calories up to 2,300 calories, and that would be change number one post-show, as an example. Example number two, Myself, for example, my lowest calories on my training days went down to about 3,700. And then I actually went up to 4,300 post-show. That was my first change. So again, 500 calories, but I did reduce my expenditure significantly, and I was also using some fat burners, which I removed, that do have an impact on this. So you have to take all these things into consideration when you do make these changes. Some other guys, I needed to give them a 1,000 calorie bump to do the same thing. So it just all depends. Tempo execution, middle ground approach, smart so don't lose power and aggression. It's very, very simple. You need to have the ability to control the movements throughout entirety range of motion. So you want to be aggressive, but with control when it comes to your concentrics. And then you need to have the ability to have the control where you are able to pause at any moment within the eccentrics. And fact of the matter is, there is no real middle ground, because if you are controlling the eccentrics, not only it's more painful, but it's actually much harder, and it's much more beneficial when it comes to actually growing muscle, because you're stronger during the eccentric phase. You're stronger as you are coming down, which only makes more sense to capitalize on that and control that portion of the rep more, which means that then you are not using momentum and you're actually keeping the tension on the muscle throughout the rep. And again, knowing what actually builds the muscle, it's the mechanical tension that you can create on it. So more control you have over movements, more mechanical tension you can create. So I don't like to cue slow tempo. I like to cue control tempo. So you need to have control, and again, powerful control within the concentrics, but still be able to control the end ranges. So for example, on a chest press, you need to have the ability to pause and stretch without bouncing out of the stretch. And same on a hack squat. If you're not able to really have that micro pause in the stretch, all you are doing then using momentum to change direction, and you're actually taking the tension off the muscle. So there is no middle ground, right? You're trying to train the muscle. You need to have full control and use the loads that you are capable of having full control over. If you are not, you are simply taken away from your ability to create meaningful stimulus on the muscle tissue. My mindset and thoughts before adding volume over time in a push-up for weak areas. Great question, and not that simple to answer. So first thing that comes to mind is, are my weaker areas improving, yes or no? If my weaker areas are improving, great, we don't change a thing. If they are not, then ask myself, is my execution and effort up to par? If it is, then we may need to look at adding some training volume. But before we do that, and if it isn't, then I address the training execution and effort first, because that will lead to more progress and more volume in itself, knowing that volume is not just sets, it is your effort and it is your execution. Then the third question is, are my lifts progressing session to session? If you are not seeing progression of your lift session to session, you might actually be working with too much training volume. So your training volume might need to actually come down rather than increasing. If you are seeing progression session to session and you are recovering well, your execution's on point, your effort's on point, but you are not seeing your weaker areas improve, that is when you have earned the right to increase your training volume slightly and be able to titrate that up in favor of your weaker areas. Now, another consideration is this. Sometimes you might need less volume if your recovery is not on point, but if you are adding volume, you may actually need to decrease the volume from your stronger body parts to create more recoverability for that weaker body part to have more attention and more work. So it's not as simple as just adding more sets. You have to have an overview and you have to look at things objectively and have full assessment in place. And the only way you can do that is if someone is actually tracking the training correctly. If they are not, you are going to struggle to make that accurate decision. I think this is going to be the final questions, guys. Number 11, actually the next one for you. How did you get to where you are today? Sick content, keep smashing it, brother. I have literally been relentless at bodybuilding and chasing my goals since the age of 16. I haven't deviated. I have always stayed true to my passion, and every single day I aim to be the best version of myself, and that's the way it's been since the age of 16. I'm 30 years old now. I actually turned 30 last week, which is quite scary. So 14 years of being relentless every single day, looking for ways at which I can improve, looking for ways where I can learn more and better myself in order for me to become a better athlete and a better coach. And this journey never stops, because in bodybuilding, There's always something new you can learn when it comes to nutrition, when it comes to training. And it's such an exciting concept for me because I know the opportunity there to continue to improve and develop is endless. You can always train harder. You can always train better. You can always train with better execution. So when you have that sort of mindset, the journey never stops and you always strive to be better. And that's my mindset, and it always has been. I set some goals out at the beginning of my journey. The first goal was to win the Junior Universe. I won that. Second goal was to open my own gym. I opened my own gym. Now I've set out some goals that are more long-term as well, which is, other things that are more related to my wife, my business, my life in general. But I have set out a goal to reach my true potential within bodybuilding. Where that lands, it lands. I did set out a goal to be an actual pro, tick that off. And I have set out a goal to one day step on Olympia stage. Whether that happens or not, it's yet to be seen. But I am going to do everything in my power to chase that goal down. And even if it never happens, it doesn't matter, because it's not even about these goals. Every single time I've achieved every single goal I've set out, it didn't actually mean that much. What meant to me the most is the journey that took me there. And that is where I thrive the most, and that is why I enjoy the most, is the process and the journey. And this is why I'm so comfortable doing what I do with being an athlete and a coach, and being able to push myself both in life, in bodybuilding and in business to keep getting better and keep striving for more. So that's pretty much how. So if you want to get to where I am, be prepared for 14 years of being relentless, and be prepared to lock in like I have for 14 years. No compromises, no middle grounds, no balance. There's been no balance with getting to where I am right now. And if you think you can have balance, unless you are, the 1% genetic elite, you have another thing coming. It's going to be a hard ride for you, pal. So guys, thank you so much for today's Q&A. If you want your questions answered, comment below, and I will do the next YouTube Q&A for you in a couple of weeks. So guys, thank you so much. Take care. Peace out for now.